Hello, everyone. It's great to be back again. If you remember, I was here with Lauren and Kelly yesterday, but I was sitting down and today I get to talk. So it's my turn to talk today. Look, we're going to continue on sort of thinking about data download packages, but today we're really sort of focusing a bit more on the practical side of how we might use DDPs, how we might request them, how we might sort of inspect them and view them. So it's a bit more of a sort of practical, sort of hands-on session today, following on from what we did yesterday. So this is sort of just a rough idea of what we're going to do. We're going to have a little bit of just a recap about what DDPs are about. I'm sure you remember. We're going to invite Kelly to come back and talk a little bit about a study that sort of she's planning to run, which sort of involves DDPs. I'm going to show you a bit of a sneak peek of the AIO platform. This is, not yet released, but a special showing for all of you today. And I'm going to show you sort of how you can go about potentially sort of setting up a DDP project on the AIO platform. And then we're going to do sort of 3 activities which are sort of really focused on DDPs, like how we can examine a raw DDP, and then using some particular tools which we've been developing to work with DDPs. So we have one called a viewer, which sort of does some visualizations of the DDP. And the last one, sort of something called the lab workspace, which can take a DDP and sort of, interrogate it a bit more and sort of, put it into a table or maybe use AI to sort of summarize aspects of it. So that's sort of just a broad idea of what we're going to be up to. It should be a really fun sort of 90 minutes today. So just a bit of a recap. I'm sure you remember a data download package. It's this thing we request from a platform. It's a collection of files which the platform provides to a user. It contains this personal data which the platform has collected about them. So we get a zip file. Usually it's a zip file which contains many files inside it, including potentially other zip files. You can have kind of zipception kind of thing. Hopefully yesterday you had a chance to actually go and request a DDP. That was like the last activity we did yesterday. If you haven't, that's completely okay. We actually have some samples, as Bogdan was saying, that you can use. But if you have your own DDP, I think it makes it more interesting. So you actually can look at it today with everyone. So why do platforms, provide these DDPs? Like, why are they available? And it's really thanks to the GDPR, that's the EU's General Data Protection Regulation. So this particular piece of legislation in Europe, it says that individuals must have the right to access personal data a platform has collected about them, receive it in some sort of structured, commonly used machine-readable format. That machine-readable part's really important. It means that the platforms don't have an obligation to provide something which is, human readable or, more amenable to us as humans to read. It really needs to be in a machine readable format. So that's why we end up with files like JSON, like CSV, like Parquet. These are sort of files which most of us probably don't interact with every day, but that's what the legislation requires them to provide. And also the legislation says that we need to sort of understand the purposes for which the data is processed. So this applies to data collected about you on the platform. So the platform obviously makes some inferred things about you, particularly LinkedIn, for example, might sort of infer what type of jobs you might be interested in. That wouldn't necessarily be contained in the DDP. It's really just more the raw data that's being collected, which is part of the DDP. So you might be thinking, well, that's all well and good, but we're in Australia here. We're here in Melbourne. We don't have the GDPR. That's not a piece of legislation which applies here, and that's very true. But basically, because of globalization, because of how the internet's sort of a worldwide phenomenon, the major platforms, they all sort of operate globally, and to basically comply with the GDPR and similar legislation which is around the world. There's some similar legislation in California, which I'm familiar with. They often provide DDPs to all users. So regardless of where we are on Earth, we can usually request a DDP. Australian users, as I said here, can usually request the same, but sometimes they're similar. So it might not be exactly the same DDP. I've got some colleagues in Europe who we've been working with, and they've sort of shared some DDPs with us, which they've requested. There's actually some subtle differences between the DDP that they received, the DDPs that we can get, but they're close enough. So they're quite workable here in Australia as well. Okay, so this is sort of the process that you potentially went through yesterday. I've sort of put this from the perspective of ChatGPT, but maybe you went through a similar sort of process when you're requesting your DDP. Usually you make a request, so you're going to the platform and saying, hey, can I please get my data? And then you have to wait. It's not usually an instant thing. It can take hours, it can take days, it can take, in some cases, weeks for the platform to get back to you with your export. You're usually notified, so you're notified usually by an email, and then once you get that email, usually the link that they provide to you doesn't last forever either. It might say, you only have 3 days to click this link to download your DDP. So when you click that link, finally you can download your export, and then you're in the process where you can explore it. So that's a really important sort of aspect to think about if you're planning on running a study which involves DDPs, or sort of all this sort of additional kind of like, structures to the study you need to sort of build in. Like, you have to think about, well, I have to ask my participants to go and request DDP. They're not going to get it immediately, so maybe I need some way to sort of notify them. Then they'll finally get it. They don't want to sort of, not see the email for 3 days, and they won't be able to download it again, so they'll be back at step 1 again. So it's just a bit of sort of, something to sort of really keep in mind if you're ever thinking about running a project of this nature. This additional sort of management you need to do to get the study working well. So attrition could be a real problem. That's something we're always sort of thinking about in the AIO, like how can we make it best for research teams to have the best attrition throughout their study. So just some quick advantages about DDPs. They are a very novel and rich sort of data source. They have sort of this longitudinal depth, which other data sources perhaps may not. And they're essentially, the raw algorithms, raw inputs that the platforms use when they're sort of using the algorithms. There's a lot of sort of limitations or perhaps disadvantages to DDPs as well. They're not perfect. There's absolutely no standardization between the platforms. If you request a DDP from one platform and you request it from another, and you look at the files and the values within them, no standardization. They have completely different file names, very different sort of values within them. The content and formats differ widely. I spoke before, some DDPs JSON files, some are CSV, some are Parquet. So even if we were sort of programmatically trying to think of a way about how to access these DDPs, we'd have to sort of think of different ways of approaching these different sort of file formats. As Lauren and Kelly spoke about yesterday, these DDPs can contain very sensitive and personal data, so we have to be very careful about what we're requesting and how we handle that data. And the final one, which is very annoying to me as a developer, is that the platforms change the content and structure without notice. So, I can wake up tomorrow and something I've built, which, is built for sort of working with an Instagram DDP, it might be broken because Instagram last night decided to change the structure of their DDP. So we're sort of constantly in this sort of, not battle, but, back and forth with the platform to try and keep our tools workable. So I guess as a bit of a summary, a DDP is not a complete record of everything the platform knows about you. They obviously know other stuff which they don't or are not required to contain within the DDP. But it does, I guess, reflect to some extent what the platform defines as accessible personal data, what can be shared without sort of exposing the internal systems or other users' privacy, and what was sort of captured for a particular period of time. So it doesn't necessarily contain everything you've ever done on the platform as well. In today's workshop, sort of for the next 90 minutes, as I said, we really encourage you to work with your own DDP if you've already got one. I think that's the most fun, but we'll also provide some samples. DDPs, they're obviously intrinsically very personal. So I really want to make sure that you feel sort of comfortable in the workshop today. So when we're sort of opening and discussing or sharing, please just do, or share what sort of you feel comfortable sharing. You're welcome to use sort of a sample DDP if you don't want to sort of use your own data today at all. All right, a bit of a, whoops, I've gone ahead too far. Just a bit of a sort of fun activity, 3 minutes just to begin with. Just want you to sort of open your phone. What app does your finger necessarily go to press to open up to scroll? I want you to think about how long do you think you've had this account? We're going to see who has the longest account here in the room. Estimate, how much screen time do you think you've spent on the app that week? That might be embarrassing, but you can go also to your digital health and see how long you've had a look at it, and think about what is the most sensitive information this platform might have about you. So have about 3 minutes, talk among your group, and then we'll come back and keep going.
Okay, everyone. How'd you all go with that exercise? Fun thinking about it. We're going to come back to this, so you'll have a bit more of a chance to explore it. Okay, I'm just going to talk you through. This is actually a study that I'm putting together with Lauren and Michael and Dan and a few others back at UQ. So I'm just going to give you this as an example of the thinking that I've been going through trying to develop this study, because I've never used DDPs before. I'm actually quite new to this whole field, but my background is, I have a lot of qualitative research behind me. So I'm thinking, how can I apply it to this type of data? So what I'm interested in is how people make sense with long duration DDP data. And this is primarily because of that question we had yesterday around consent. How can people be adequately informed, particularly when they're looking at very long durations of time? And the other thing I'm interested in is, well, it's basically choice, how autonomy develops over time. And so I'm using this one theory. It's called organismic integration theory. It's a sub-theory of self-determination theory. And look, I'm just going to give you the very quick overview. It is a framework for how extrinsic motivation sort of develops towards intrinsic motivation. And my thinking on it is that people's use of platforms over time actually shows a lot of different types of motivation. It's not necessarily like a step ladder leading up towards being intrinsically motivated, but I really would like to explore this using DDPs as an elicitation prompt for that kind of thinking. So I'm going to be making use of survey to collect demographics, but also to get us basically a current measure of what their motivation is towards that platform. And I'm going to be asking for people to collect definitely Instagram, and if they're really keen, also Facebook, if they have active account data on those platforms. Because one of the things I think might be happening over time is a shift, potentially, particularly amongst certain age groups, from one platform to another. And that could be another thing that we can talk about. Yeah, and I'm sort of designing activities around that. There'll be some co-analysis, and my data set will be primarily qualitative interviews with some sort of thematic analysis. My anticipated challenges, I think the primary thing for me is that I'm operating on a very tight timeline, which I'm sure some of those who are doing PhDs can appreciate. So I'm hoping to keep this a low-risk ethics application so that I can get it through quickly. So a lot of that hinges on how we deal with consent around sharing of sensitive data. It's very likely I'm going to be collecting sensitive data, or that participants might want to even take me through that when they're recollecting things of their use of the platform. But what we're doing is, and I think you're going to demonstrate this in a little bit, Michael, basically a submission process that allows the participants to explore and redact and make choices around what they share with me. And we're also going to develop hopefully develop some tools to assist with the co-analysis as well, visualization. I'm going to be using some of the findings from this study to feed back into those submission processes for the AIO. So it'll be a way of collecting a little bit of information about that. One of the nice features I think that I'll be able to use is that when data is redacted before it's shared, I'll be able to see that data is redacted. I won't be able to see what that data is, but I'll be able to talk to participants about, I'm hoping, generally, what types of data were you wanting to redact and what we can learn from that. And obviously, my main, question that relates to that theory of autonomy. So anyway, that's one approach. It is certainly not the only approach. I've been interviewing researchers who are coming from experimental methodologies, highly quantitative methodologies, but if you've got a qualitative research background, you can absolutely use DDPs in that. I'm going to hand over to you, Michael. Oh yeah, any questions about that? No.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Okay, so we're going to keep moving on now. And as I said at the beginning, I'm going to show you a bit of a demo about how you might set up a DDP project on the Australian Observatory platform. So there's a bit of a disclaimer. This is still, under development. It's not yet in the wild. But I'll sort of show you I guess, some of our thinking about what we've been doing. This is a bit awkward because I sort of have to use the computer and also stand here, but I'll do my best. So let me open up a website. Make it a little bit bigger for you as well. So just imagine that you're a researcher in a research team, or maybe by yourself, and you sort of come to the Australian Internet Observatory, and you've got in mind, I want to sort of run a particular study using DDPs, but the AIO is also going to support other things. We spoke yesterday about how we're also going to support sort of screen recording and other methods as well, but let's just leave it to DDPs for today. So what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to log in. I've already logged in myself here with your sort of institutional credentials. So you can log in with your RMIT, Monash, Melbourne Uni, whatever university you're from. You can log in and then go ahead and sort of create a new project. So here on this project creation page, we can put in a name. Now I might call this one SICSS. We can give it a project type. So these are different types of projects that we're supporting. So you can see we've got data download package, mobile streaming and browser extension are still coming soon. So I'm going to pick download data package. And then there's sort of a bit, as we were talking about before, around, how do we actually deal with our participants? Like, how do we want to sort of identify them? Are we using other systems such as Qualtrics for a survey? So you might have to give some thought around sort of how you're going to sort of do identity management, participant identity management. Just for today, I'm going to say I want an anonymous donation. So I just want to create a link which I can share, maybe on Facebook, maybe with, a group of participants. I just want them all to come and anonymously donate. But you might want a situation where you want to know who your participants are, in which case you'd pick another option. And here you can sort of put some contact information about who you are. So when they come to your site to donate, they know, what the study is all about. I'll just leave it blank for today. So here I'm going to go create my project. And so now I get taken to this sort of manage project page. So on this particular page, as a research team, you're sort of coming up with the sort of what we call briefing page, data donation, and debriefing pages. So the briefing page is basically the first page your participants will see when they go to your study link. So we might click on this one, and I'll just put, just hello, welcome to my study. We'll save that one. That's done. The second one is around data donation. So here is where we're saying what type of data do we want to collect from the participants. This is really important because, we don't want to necessarily capture everything within the DDP. So we can create a new uploader, and here we can say, well, what platform do we want to collect for? So you can see we've got quite a few different options there. I might just go with Instagram today, just a sort of default one. And we'll say here, Instagram. And then we ask the researchers on the platform to go and download their own DDP. So they go through the process of understanding what the participants will do. And so here as a researcher, I've already downloaded my DDP. So I'm going to come and select my Instagram DDP. Open up, and you can see that what it's done is it's taken my zip file. This is actually Lauren's zip file, which I took from her. And it says, well, this is the main folder, and these are all the files and folders within that folder. So you can see that this Instagram DDP contains a folder called Preferences and a folder called Settings. And it's got some things here around notifications. It's got something about topics. It's got some stuff around activities, shopping. So in my particular study, I don't want to sort of capture all this data, right? Like I'm only interested maybe in some particular things. So I can sort of go ahead and uncheck. I don't want anything in here. I don't want to capture, the Instagram activity. Maybe I'm really interested just in ads information, for an example. So that's the main thing I want to capture. I'll untick these as well. And so now I'm sort of setting it up so that for my particular project, when the participant uploads their DDP, we're only going to capture these particular files in the ads information. So this really helps, with your ethics, or when you're sort of, giving a participant information sheet, you can sort of say to participants, we're only capturing a subset of your data. And probably what I'd also encourage you to do is to actually go in those files yourself and have a look what's in them. Like right now, we're just seeing just the file names. So here, I've got this done. And then we also want to sort of provide some instructions to the participants about how they can go and get their DDP. So that's already provided for you on the platform. We've put some default instructions there. And so I can go ahead and create this particular uploader for Instagram. Back on the managed project page, we've sort of only got one step left. It's the sort of debriefing page. This is the last page participants see once they've donated. So here on the debriefing page, I can type, thanks for donating. And that's it. I've set up my project. There's other things you can do, like you can sort of add your collaborators, add your other researchers, manage participants, all that kind of stuff. But that's the core of it all done. And so what the platform does is it generates this link for you. So this link is a particular link which is just for your study. So now if you were to open it up, you'd see, this is the briefing page. That's what I typed in, hello, welcome to the study. It's giving the participants, those instructions. How can they go and download their DDP? And then at the bottom, it says, well, are you ready to donate? Yes, I'm now being a participant. I'm going to donate. And so here it's asking me to provide my Instagram DDP. So I'll pretend to be a participant and say, hey, I'm going to donate my Instagram DDP. And you can see that here it's only showing the files which I selected on that other page. So it doesn't have the whole DDP now. It's only got those particular files. And as a participant, I can decide, no, I don't really want to share some of this stuff. Maybe it's a bit sensitive to me or I don't feel comfortable. So maybe, for example, I don't want to share the posts I've viewed, but I'm happy to share the ads I've viewed. So we're really giving the participant the options, to consent to what they're seeing. This version I'm showing you is a little bit of an older version. We actually have a newer version of this page, which even lets the participant actually go into the file and see the particular fields and values within it, and then even redact things within it that I don't want to share. So we've sort of even gone a further step, but in this version, it's basically at the file level. So here, I'm very happy with my donation. It all looks good. And so I would go ahead and submit. This project's currently inactive, so I can't submit, but that's what I'd do. I'd submit, and then I'd see that debriefing page, thanks for donating. So that's sort of, I guess, the basic, at a very basic level, that's sort of the flow we're sort of going for, something which, is quite easy for researchers to come in, to set up a project, to sort of pick the particular things they want to capture from the DDP, and then making sure that on the participant side, the participants really have that autonomy and are sort of really giving that informed consent about what they are donating. That's a little bit of, I guess, a sneak peek at the AIO platform. I'm going to invite Dan up in a moment just to talk about sort of DDPs, but just before he does anyone have any questions about what they just saw about the platform? Oh, that's all good. Brilliant. Dan, over to you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Michael. And yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dan Tran, and I don't think you've seen me before. So I am Michael's partner in crime. Basically, I am also a software developer based at the University of Queensland. And I'm also working on the Australian Internet Observatory. And what I will show you now is while Michael's were doing the demonstration, and let me actually get out of that and go to Michael's page over here. We see that this particular donation, it is littered with files that ends with JSON. And unless you have worked as a data scientist, a computer scientist, or someone who did at least some kind of data analysis before, you wouldn't have encountered JSON. And if you don't know what JSON is, well, for your information, it's not a K-pop band. It is a file extension, and similar to CSV, you have encountered before, I assume so, which stands for comma separated values, basically a table. JSON is more nested. And what I really want to look into today is exploring JSON. And because understanding JSON not only would benefit you when it comes to analyzing platform data, if you do any kind of data analysis similar to what Richard was showing before just an hour ago, you would likely interact with JSON as well, using Jupyter Notebook or otherwise. So going into my slide, like if you have downloaded your DDP before, you would have encountered JSON. If you haven't, feel free to interact with the sample ones we have over here. I will bring the slides up later, so don't rush to just click on it. I'm just going to show what is in it. All right, so this is a sample data set from ChatGPT. And if I zoom in a bit so we can see it, we have the standard HTML. It stands for Hypertext Markup Language, basically something you can open in your browser nicely. And now if I go to the next file, conversations.json, it will look something like this. And as we can see, it is quite nested. Like you have an ID over here, you have a conversation ID over here, and amongst of that, you would get some meaningful data, the title of the conversation, and perhaps the term. And for your information, this term, when it comes in a JSON, it doesn't actually look like that. If I hover over that field, it comes in a number, just like so. And this number, when read by a human, it doesn't really mean anything. It's just a long number. And if I scroll down a bit, perhaps I will be able to find some meaningful information. Let's say there is something about a user. There is something about, hey, quick question. When should I actually use a hash map? Whatever that is. So that is what a JSON look like. And I'm going to break it down part by part. Now going back to the slide. There. So JSON, it stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It is originally used by programmers to send data between, well, different computers. And a JSON file typically looks something like that. You have some text, you have some brackets, and each of these symbols has a meaning. So let's start with the bracket. It creates a list. So let's say you have a conversation history that contains many messages. So all of these messages can fit into a list, and that would be wrapped by a bracket. And then the curly braces. It is going to group detailed information together. Let's say you have a chat message with some kind of content. So that chat message can be wrapped in a curly bracket. And if you're familiar with programming, it will be called an object. And then within that object, within that curly bracket, you would have what we call the fields. And it is separated by colons, and we call them key value pairs. And it basically means inside this object, there is an ID. Inside this same object, there is a message. And this ID maps to a certain value. And this message maps to a certain value. And we call them the key value pair. All right, and finally, to separate between the fields, we use comma. So we have ID being one field, message being another field, separated by a comma. And later on, if you interact with any kind of JSON data, whether you get it from an API or from data download package or otherwise, it will be structured exactly the same. You always have some kind of list, some kind of objects, and some kind of fields. All right. And now I'm going to invite you to actually look into your DDP. And as I mentioned before, if you have downloaded your DDP before, amazing. Otherwise, if you visit the first link, you will be taken to this page. And on this page, there is a download button. So if I simply click on it, it will give me a zip file similar to what I would get from a platform. All right, and now you would probably see me struggling with operating a Mac, but as in you can double click on a zip file that's extracted, and then in this scenario, this data download package contains multiple files, and we can assume that it came from different participants. So perhaps let's say I go to demo 1, and as we can see, there is a chat.html file. Double click on it, it simply is open in a browser. Alternatively, we have conversations.json. And I'm not sure if Michael had a standard way to open a JSON. I will give it a try by double clicking on it. And it opens in a text editor, looking like so. And for your information, that conversations.json, I think it came from the demo one. It has the exact same content as this one. And I'll bring them side by side for your comparison as well. So this is what you would get if you open it raw. If you just download it, then open it in your computer without any special program. And it has the exact same content as what you're seeing on the right. And I think without me having to ask, you can already tell which one is more readable. So that brings us to, if you need to analyze JSON data, what tools can you do? What tools can you use? Because Michael raised a very important question. When you are either designing your research or when you are donating, you need to understand what is in the data. In order to do that, you need to be able to open a JSON. So the nice thing is you can open a JSON in your browser as well. And I will try to figure out how to do it on a Mac. I usually do it on a Windows computer, but what you usually can do is you can right click on it and you can open it with. And then you can either choose your note editor or your text editor or Google Chrome. So let me quickly open it in Google Chrome. And Google Chrome, maybe I need to zoom in a bit as well. It has a nice, pretty print button on top. And once you click on it, it automatically formats to look nicely. So you can exactly see what fields are in there. So again, we have an ID, we have a conversation history, we have a title, and this is formatted exactly the same as the demo I showed you before. And scrolling down, we have a user message, the content, I have a huge essay due, blah, blah, blah. And going down a bit, we have the response from ChatGPT. All right, and of course, you can, if you have used any code editor before, you can open a JSON in there as well, or there are plenty of online tools available for you to do it. And that actually includes, well, one of our Australian Internet Observatory viewers. And I would encourage that you keep this link handy, full short or otherwise, so you can access later, because it may come in handy for your next activities. All right. And now that brings us to the activity. We are going to try and look at one raw file, or two if you want to. And in that file, it doesn't really matter where it came from. It could be from the sample data we provided. It could be from your old data download package, or any kind of JSON you can find online that works as well. And in that file, try to find the timestamps, some kind of ID, some kind of like meaningful information, anything that interests you, and just think about what the data really represent. All right, the time starts. Awesome, yeah, 2 times, that's good. Yeah, so yeah, thanks a lot for participating, and it's amazing to see that some of you have tried to download your DDP, or at least like you're exploring JSON. And I was wondering, is there anything you want to share from that particular experience? Is there any kind of data set that interests you? Oh, yes. Oh.
To know how you're ensuring its safety and security, or are you deleting it after a while?
Right. Yeah. And like, was that a result of something you found in the JSON that you got, or?
No, I think I just downloaded to the link that we shared.
Oh, right.
And obviously, it's really looking to see the granular details, or all the details about the conversations. But these are also some very personal details I also think quite a few people might still be uncomfortable
Right.
uploading their data to see the visualization. So I was just wondering, what's the how you're ensuring safety of the data?
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a really good question, and it's something we definitely want to raise awareness about as well. Yeah, as Michael mentioned, in the newer version of the platform, you are able to redact the data you don't want to share as well. But I mean, like, if your concern is about what the platform is doing with your data, then like maybe that is the kind of research question our platform will enable you to answer. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for your input. And yeah, now I'll actually bring you to the AIO viewers. I prompted you to take a look at this beforehand as well, and some of you already did. That is amazing. But I think it would be a good idea to showcase it to everyone as well, so you can maybe get a better understanding of what it is capable of and what kind of research question it may help you answer. Right.
Let me just open it in. Yeah. All right, so this is the Australian Internet Observatory DDP viewer, and it is a collection of different, well, bespoke viewers we have created for different platforms. That includes ChatGPT, YouTube, Instagram, and additionally there is a lab workspace as well, which is also in beta. Well, not really in beta, it's not released yet, but the lab workspace is a more general one, and the other ones are, well, bespoke, more specific to a platform. And if we look into one of these, let's say ChatGPT, you can upload a zip file containing ChatGPT DDP, and I believe I have downloaded some before, which I will re-upload. You call sample1, sample2, demo.zip. And then once you upload it, you will get a bunch of data and a bunch of like aggregation. Let's say how many conversations you have had, how many messages, the timestamp you have spent on ChatGPT, and it doesn't have to be you. It can be your participants as well. And we are also mindful that you are concerned about where your data is going if you decide to upload your data to our platform. And the answer to that is this operates entirely on your browser, so no data is leaving your browser. And it does require internet connection so that you can get the tool, but after that, it doesn't upload your data to anywhere, anything. All right, and yeah, it allows you to do a bit of breakdown on, or like an overview of your data. Let's say your message activity, what is the longest conversation you've had? In this case, somebody tried to maybe ask ChatGPT about a case study assignment that they were assigned to, or they are contemplating whether they should do their major, something like that. And yeah, for your information, this information is totally synthetic, so any resemblance is just purely coincidental. And additionally, most recent information may be interesting. And there are also language signals, basically the words that you or the agent has used the most. And we can find some, well, common English words like time, yeah, start, etc. And on the AIO viewer, you are able to dig down into the individual data point as well. So you can view the raw files, and then that will expand the JSON for you. So over here, we have a record, which I believe is a conversations. This particular conversation has 9 messages. And then if you break it down, you can find the content, and break it down again, you find the exact text. And additionally, let's say we can go back and look at YouTube, for example. And in this case, I don't already have a YouTube dataset, which is fine. We have supplied you with the sample data, so you can just click on the load demo files button. And it will show you our demonstration files, which may take a while. Is it supposed to be this long, Michael? Oh, there we go. Amazing. Well, I mean, it's YouTube videos, you know. All right, in this particular example, you have multiple zip files in your donation, so you can browse between them. And then that will bring you to 2 different donations. And as I mentioned, these are bespoke viewers, so they were built specifically for the platform. So in ChatGPT, you would have some language signals, and for a YouTube viewer, you are going to have your watch history. And yeah, that brings us to the next activity, which I think some of you may already be doing. That is using our AIO viewers to explore your DDP. So if you're already doing that, please keep going with that. But if you haven't, yeah, please try and have a look at the AIO viewer, and we would welcome any form of feedback, or well, if you happen to find any bugs as well. Hi again, everyone. I think this one is a bit louder. All right, I think we can skip the clapping now. All right, so yeah, thanks for exploring the AIO viewers with us, and thanks a lot for reporting your findings, your requirements, and also bugs as well. And now I want to bring your attention to another tool we have built. And as I previously mentioned when I was showcasing, let me go back to that page where I was showcasing the viewer. There is a final module. It is called the Lab Workspace. And the Lab Workspace, it is designed to be a generic tool for you to upload your own zip file. It can contain, and your zip file, it doesn't have to be from any particular platform. It can be from anywhere. Like that is the vision we had in mind, although we would like a lot of input to finalize that vision. But in this case, let's say in the Lab Workspace, you are able to upload your zip file, and I would try to do that from one of the demo. I'll show you another, like some kind of other data set as well from Reddit. But for now, I will reuse my ChatGPT data. And this one, after I upload the zip file, I can analyze and visualize it. And after a bit, we get an overview of the data. And over here, we are experimenting with using generative AI to describe your data set. And hopefully that can give you some guidance into what you may want to look into in your data set. And for example, in this data, it contains a series of interactions, conversations taken place with the system. You have the key fields down there. And these fields that we may want to pay attention to, perhaps the ID of the conversation itself, the title of the conversation, etc. And then you can look into the data using the data inspector, which brings you to a format similar to what we saw in the ChatGPT viewer. So that way you can explore the raw data yourself. So over here, I have the message from a conversation. All right, and if you want, you can try and ask AI about what is in a conversation. I will give it a try. There were some suggestions as well. Maybe when were the user's conversation created and which day had the most number of new conversations. I can click on that. I can submit a query. And then it should come back with a response. Finger crossed.
While that's happening,
Yes.
question.
Oh, yes.
What model are you using and what other parameters did you set for it?
Maybe you want
to. Look, at the moment, this is using which one did we go with? I think it was the one released by OpenAI, which is the 20 billion parameter OSS model. That's the one, yeah. But we've tried a few different ones. I think there's a bit of a trade-off between the price, the speed, all those sorts of things. And yeah, I think as we're sort of saying, you know, this is sort of hasn't been sort of released yet. But what we're sort of hoping to do is the AIO has access to a few sort of GPUs which are running on sort of the Nectar. I think Nectar come and talked to you the other day, and so we've got access to a few GPUs there. So we're hoping to run sort of our own models on them. This one here is actually not, it's being hosted somewhere. It's not being run on Nectar, just for context. But yeah, I think we're still very much exploring that space. Yeah, so got any suggestions for some great new models which come out. We'd love to hear them. Gemma 4, yes. So you have Gemma as well, yes.
Yeah, we can totally try Gemma 4.
Okay, you keep going down.
Yeah. But yeah, while we're discussing that, our model came up with a response, and let's see. So it said all conversations in the 3 tables have the timestamp. It seems a bit technical, but later on it does give us the day with the most conversations, being the 19th of March 2026, with 4 conversations. And again, we are still exploring what is the capabilities of this approach. Like, can using AI really help us to uncover data meaningfully without having to look too deep into the data ourselves? Like, think of it as perhaps an initial preliminary look into the data rather than a deep dive. And then later on, we also experimenting with some kind of visualization as well, like the frequency bars. I'm not sure if I am able to find a meaningful feel for it. Let's say conversation ID, that doesn't really make sense, but the title, perhaps if you want to find the different titles in your chat history, this is one way to do it. You can do it in word cloud as well. I think that would be a good place for the title. So yeah, I'm going to remove the ID from that, trying to keep just the title. And now we have a decent word cloud. So assignment, asking, week, nuggets. Relevant, yeah. All right, and of course we have like topic tree maps. Again, we may need to remove some of the fields. Let's say I remove the kernel, so I am left with only the title. So now in the title, so now from a title, I got a tree map containing asking, which came up 2 times, assignments, which came up 2 times, etc. And finally, we have a timeline. And this is, yeah, this can be used to visualize your chat history. Let's say on the 24th of March 2026, you had 2 conversations, and on most other days, you had 1. And you can group them by week as well. So the week of 2026, the 14th of March, that's when most conversation happened. And you can also group by month, which I think just March 2026. And to demonstrate the power of the workspace, or what we envision the workspace to be able to do, let's analyze another dataset. And I'm going to use the Observatory dataset. And I believe this one originates from Melbourne, originally from Melbourne team. Oh, the QT Digital Observatory team. And they collected quite a lot of data from Reddit. And looking at this dataset, to be honest with you, it's been a long time since I had a look at this dataset. I don't even remember what is in it. But what it may be interesting to see is if using the lab workspace can help me, reignite some of that memory. So in the overview, I can see that it has some kind of table. And in the table, I can see some title, some text, some permalink, some scores. And then the purpose of this table, maybe that's a good starting point. And then some key columns to focus on. So I have different submission. I assume that is a Reddit post. And then when it was created, the score, the week it was created, some political reason. And now I start to remember that this particular collection of data, it was collected during the federal election
or the Queensland election. And looking into the data inspector, I can see the data in its raw form. So we have some title, the title, some post, some text, etc. And then I can ask a question, or I think in this case, the visualization will look a bit more interesting. So over here, we can see the number of posts per subreddit. And apparently within, like during the election period, the Australia subreddit was the most popular one, which I don't think is surprising. And then Melbourne is also interesting. Australian politics, who would have guessed? And Perth, Adelaide, Australia, and Brisbane. So like a lot of Australian related top subreddits. And then the word cloud would likely disclose some interesting information as well. A lot of text was about political, the election itself, the government, the people, etc. And the topic tree map would likely disclose a similar kind of information. And finally, the timeline can show you the activity within Reddit on these topics. So it looks like the 27th of March was the most popular day for Reddit activities. And yeah, like now we invite you to try and have a look at the lab workspace yourself. And the way that you can get access to that is using this same link and just simply select the lab workspace out there. And once you get in there, yeah, feel free to try our demo dataset or upload your own. All right, and I think we are going to do that until the end of the session.